Right, here we see the standard BMW GT Sport with the side roundels, all nice and flush fitting, rather boring, doesn't really help to let anybody know you're here. Well, we're soon going to change that. First step is to mark up the orientation of the roundels so that when you put them back later you get them in the right place, because you do have to cut the lugs off that would lock it into place in exactly the same place. Once the bit of tape is on the center line, just gently cut through around the roundel itself, and then the roundel can obviously come through at a later date. So the side panel has altogether 6 screws to remove, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, and a little black plug that sits in there and is quite fiddly to get out, especially without damaging it. It may not be going back in, I'm not sure yet. When you take the screws out, I would advise putting them well labelled. They are very slightly different lengths, so it's worth keeping them in order. Then just pull the panel off and put it aside on a nice piece of soft cushioning so you don't scratch the surface. Then what you need to do, just pop off the roundel by pushing the black tabs until the roundel comes free. The black tabs themselves will be taken off and removed later. That's part of the destructive process, unfortunately. You'll then end up with a roundel separate, tags that will, as I say, be coming off later, and a hole all marked up so you've got the orientation to go back on when you're finished. So the next thing to do is to take one of the LED assemblies, using a 2mm drill, going through these 2 holes here. We need to mark up where we will drill holes for the mounting screws to actually go. You can just see it, there is a alignment notch on the top edge, and that is the vertical center, which you need to line up with the edge of the tape that you've got on your body before you mark the drilling holes. So remember, it's a 2mm drill to go through these holes, and it will later be a 3.5mm drill that you'll put through the plastic here to enable you to mount the light fitting to it. Once you've marked the holes, you can then proceed to drill a 3.5mm hole that will become the screw holes to mount the light fitting. Carefully drill your 3.5mm holes. The next step is to take your LED light fitting, pass it through the wires through the central hole where the roundel mounts, and place that. Screw hole should, if all goes well and you've drilled them properly, should line up. You then need to flip your panel over, holding the light fitting in place, and the next job is to apply the 2 8mm screws that come with the kit, using a Phillips head to secure this light in place, making sure you keep that central alignment as perfect as you possibly can. Once you've tightened the screws, you should have a piece of wire excluding inside the panel, and your light fitting should be nice and central on the outside. So the next thing we have to do is make up the male connector, or the waterproof connector end, with the single wires, individual wires that we have at the moment. So you'll get a block here, and then you have another block which is obviously already made up, and the colours are in the right order, I should say. So use that as your guide for making sure the wires go into the other end in the correct sequence. Basically what you have to do is push these individual ends into the end of the black unit here as far as you can, and you should hear a click. Obviously I need to get this right, so I won't be filming it, but I will show you the results afterwards. Once all the wires are pushed properly home and you've heard a click, what you will see is that the yellow seals are several millimeters down inside the housing, and at the other end you'll see the 3 pins that come out through the holes in the bottom, so this will now make a good connection. The next thing we need to do are make the electrical connections for the light unit into the bike. This is so we obviously get the daylight running lights and the right turn indicator. Currently looking at the right hand side of the bike, and where we will need to tap into the wiring loom is this wire here that goes down to the indicator itself, and then this wire here that goes up to the onboard power socket on the right hand side. We'll need to strip back some of this black insulating tape, 4 or 5 centimeters, just to allow you to separate the wires so you can add the taps to them. They give you some protective sleeving. It comes in one piece. Cut it in half so they're equal lengths, and then slip it over the 3-wired piece, which is the female end of the waterproof connector. Top tip, use a bit of talcum powder in your hand as you pass the wires into it. It helps the wires slide down through the protective tubing much more easily. You'll then see you're left with about 8 to 10 inches of wire at the end. We'll probably reduce that length once we've worked out exactly where we will connect them into the wires on the bike. Already exposed the 2 wires that will be part of the connection. Those are the 2 wires that go down to the indicator itself, and then, as I say, I'll be exposing the positive power wire within this lead up to the bike power socket. So connections are made into the bike using these very neat tiny Scotch block branch terminals, whatever you want to call them. So for the line going up to the bike power socket, you use the black and red line, and the blue wire will go to that. For the indicators, what you will have is the black wire for the indicator needs to go to the brown of the indicator, and the red from the external connection needs to go to the black and blue wire that goes to the bike indicator. So all you need to do, thread the wires in, make sure they're there, use a little plier just to press these down and it will make a connection. Again, I'm not going to film those, but I'll show you the results afterwards. So I decided the little blade connectors that came with it aren't terribly good. Fortunately, I have some really nice ones here. A-Lighting's wire splice connectors, very simple to use. Multiple different ways of connecting T-junctions, 1 wire to 2, all sorts of combinations. So I'm going to be using these. Okay. So connections all made now. So as I said, blue goes to the black and red on the power, red goes to the black and blue on the bike, black goes to the brown on the bike. So I haven't obviously tidied this all up with insulation tape and so on, but what I'm going to do now is actually connect the indicator, and we're going to give it a test, and fingers crossed all will work good. So the instructions that come with suggest that you tap your power for the indicator light into the indicators on the bike at this point here, and then for the daylight running light power on with ignition, tap it into the auxiliary power socket. Now of course the problem with that is if you use that power socket for a trickle charger or charging your bike, and as soon as you plug a trickle charger in, the DLR on this side comes on and stays on all the time that you are charging. So you're going to use up the LED life, potentially drain your battery as well. So what I've done is tap into the auxiliary lighting circuit, and what we're looking at is tapping into the red and yellow cable that comes out of the back of the auxiliary socket. Well, that's the first side, the daylight running light LED is working. That's going to look pretty funky. Yep, that's just the camera system starting up, but
recording started.
that should be very good. Now I'll just try it with the indicator. So the panel is back in place, all screwed in, all nice and secure. Next job is to take all of these tabs off of the roundel, file it down so it's nice and smooth, and then what we will do is apply a adhesive ring around the inside here and then attach it back to the side of the bike. So make sure the underside of the roundel is thoroughly clean. I use an alcoholic wipe, or alcohol wipe I should say. I've no idea of its personal troubles. Then stick on one of these self-adhesive rings, making sure it's as central as you can possibly make it. And then as soon as you're ready, peel off the backing, and using the guide tapes, we'll reapply it in the perfect alignment for the side panel. I will show that for you shortly. So we're all reattached now, so that's what it looks like on the side of the bike. A little bit more proud than it was before, but you know, not significantly different from the original side, which I've yet to do. So here's the big test. What does it look like when they're running? So got the daylight running light on now, so you can just see the illuminated disc. Probably not hyper bright compared to certainly the daylight ones in the headlights, but you can see that they're illuminated, and I should imagine at night they're going to look pretty damn good. So this is them with the hazards on. See them flashing with the bike. And obviously nothing yet on this side, but that's soon to be fixed. Okay, for the left hand side things are a little more difficult in that you don't have the positive with ignition power for the socket. So for the black and red wires from the indicator, you tap into the same colours as are on the indicator connections on the other side. So red goes to the blue and black goes to the brown. Unfortunately, there is no immediately obvious power positive with ignition on this side of the bike. You've obviously got a whole heap of wires over here. What I've tracked down is the connector for the auxiliary lights, and what I've determined is that either of the red and yellow or the orange wires that you see here are positive with ignition. So I'm going to tap into one of those. I'm going to go with the red and yellow one, and we'll see how that works. And that seems to be a pretty good choice, because I have the daylight running lights that come on when the ignition works, and if I hit the indicators, if I can find them, then I get indication. Excellent. So, seems like a good choice. Now to tidy up. Okay, I've managed to, what I've done now that I'm tidying up, I've just drilled a small hole here, use it to cable tie just to hold that wire secure. And then now I think we're good to just tidy up and connect and put the panel back. Well, here is the finished product. Looks nice and subtle and discreet, not too obvious. And yeah, very pleased with how they fit in. So I suppose I better show you them with the lights running. So here we go with all lights blazing. So we've got auxiliaries, we've got daylight running lights to the side, we've got daylight running lights at the front. What more can we want? And here we go with the hazards flashing. You see, all nicely synchronised. Looks good. Very pleased.